Hey there, Mr. Leary here. We're World History looking at the Renaissance, and we will, of course, conjoin that with the Reformation. Those two periods or events in history kind of go together. Time period-wise, we're talking about 1300s through probably the early 1600s. We want to emphasize today first power and money, because that's kind of where the Renaissance starts. If the Renaissance is this rebirth of culture and rebirth of learning back to some Greco-Roman principles here, it's going to happen because power brokers in Europe are going to demand it, and they're going to have the money to fund it. Looking at Europe coming out of the Middle Ages, your notes say that plague and wars were catastrophic. Disease was sweeping through Europe. The Black Plague, already a couple of experiences in the 1300s, would have its own run of that deadly disease. And wars, particularly events like the 100 Years' War, would be catastrophic to the main players of Europe, European power. So if you were surviving in Europe, if you had gotten through all of that, you were probably ready to do some celebrating, if you will. And you were also kind of questioning some of the decision-making that had been going on in the Middle Ages. We talked about how feudalism was starting to break down. People's loyalties were coming into question. They were starting to maybe break those ties that bind. So as we look at this rebirth of Greco-Roman culture and an emphasis on art and learning, your notes say that there will be an emphasis on the individual, much more than the community aspect of feudalism, where all the peasants are perhaps trying to survive collectively. This movement was going to spread from south to north. Interaction with these new ideas on the Italian peninsula, because of its location in the middle of the Mediterranean, with trade, is going to be the starting place. So we'll talk about those city-states first. But understand that as time goes on and trade begins to move northward, and the money begins to move northward, the ideas of the Renaissance will follow. But let's go back to Italy. Your notes say this is where you will have thriving cities, a wealthy merchant class, and a heritage of classical Greek and Roman culture. Those merchants, those middle-class money makers. We said in here before that when middle classes grow, they want power, and now that they have the money to fund those power grabs, or to have influence, they're going to start doing some changing. So those city-states, after the Crusades, trade is going to grow and flow into those city-states. Northern Italy is becoming increasingly urbanized. Remember, the Middle Ages was a very rural system. Towns were not very prolific. More and more people are going to start moving to the towns. We talked about after the enclosure system of the Middle Ages is going to force people kind of off their land, and as they move to the towns and creating those guilds of artisanship, they're going to lose that sense of identity that's found through loyalty. In towns and cities, just like today, ideas are exchanged more readily. This is a breeding ground for change. You often see some of the more progressive ideas in current societies often start out of urban locations. But also, cities are going to be hit hardest by the plague because the disease can spread much more quickly. And those who are left behind are going to be able to demand the higher wages. So more money, and we're going to associate that perhaps with more power. The merchants, again, that's middle class, they were gaining wealth, they were gaining power. They had not inherited their social rank, they had earned it. And because of that, they're willing to bind together, sometimes to, I'll say overthrow, but challenge the traditional power brokers of Europe. You're going to start to see republican forms of government. That means elections. The ideas of democracy are going to start to infiltrate back into the Italian peninsula, much like it had been during the Roman Republic, and you're going to see that connection there. Cities like Florence became gateways of this change. And then also the money makers. Notice in Florence the Medici family, very influential. They'll be able to use their money to not only make decisions about what the art and the culture is going to look like, but also what the political power and sometimes even the religious power is going to look like in Europe. And now onto the connection with Greece and Rome. The proximity here of the Italian peninsula with Greece and Rome is going to be an emphasis to return to those styles of learning. The ancient manuscripts that have been preserved in the monasteries are going to start being brought back out and recognized for their validity. So last bullet on this set of notes here, new power sources are going to continue to struggle. There's still a recipe for conflict here, but it's going to change the way society is going to look. Nobles continue to want position and favor within the church. You're going to also see the church, which had lessened in power, is going to still hold some authority. So this isn't going to be an immediate transition here from this is the way things used to be. Some of this change is going to be very slow and gradual, and obviously people with power want to continue to hold on to that power. So trying to hold all these relationships together between nobles, these new players, these middle-class merchants, and the church, it says is going to become increasingly challenging for the leadership of the Renaissance, and also the motives of the players are changing, and the prizes that they can achieve will change. So we're going to continue to look at the Renaissance and see how that changed not only political power but also culture next time. Thanks.